Hey everybody, welcome to our session today. My name is Shane. I run the events over at TEN Capital Network, and we're really excited to have y'all today. We have a great event for you today, the TEN Life Science Syndicate, where you're going to see all kinds of things relevant to life science. So with that, I'm going to bring up our panelists for today. Let me do that now. And just a reminder, as we get started with our session, our chat box is open for questions. So throughout the event, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat box. And also, please don't forget to answer the poll at the end of each pitch. Thank you. And Hall, do you want to get us started?
Great. Thanks, Shane. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a great lineup of companies and presenters today. This is the TEN Capital Life Science Syndicate. It's one of our 7 online events we do each month. And to kick it off, what we want to do is invite Sean Dwyer to come up. He's with Baylor University doing research on entrepreneurship. I'd like to tell you a little bit about his work and ask for your support. Sean?
Thank you so much, Hall. Appreciate it. I'll be sharing my screen here in just a second. You should be able to see. So I'm doing a research study at Baylor University. It's for my dissertation in entrepreneurship. Seeking to understand the motivations of entrepreneurs and purpose of entrepreneurs. I'd love to invite you to take part in a 40 to 60-minute Zoom interview with me. I would love the chance to talk with you and learn from you and give you the opportunity to contribute to research. And at the end of the study as well, I'll be providing people with an executive summary of my findings as well. So if you're interested, please feel free to scan this QR code, or Shane will also be popping up a poll afterwards. So would love the chance to meet you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Sean. We have 2 investors on our panel today. One of them, Mary, will give us a content presentation. But first, let's talk to Ben Nair of Elevate Capital Fund. Ben, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your fund?
Sure. So I'm a scientist by training. I spent 12 years doing bench research before getting into the investing world. Elevate Capital is a mission-driven venture fund, which is based in Portland, Oregon, but we are a national fund, primarily seed stage, moving into Series A as well. We invest in diverse founding teams, so we look for diverse leadership. We like to see diverse leaders at the actual C-level making important decisions for the companies. We also have some smaller funds that invest specifically in life science, clean tech, and other deep technology areas.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Our other investor on the panel is Mary Wheeler, Managing Director of BioRock Ventures. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And also, let's go ahead and hear your talk about therapeutic startups.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Hall and Shane, and for giving me the chance to speak a bit. I am going to just quickly load a quick deck. So I am speaking to you all from the Bay Area of California. You guys can let me know if you can't see this. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you can.
We can see it fine.
Great. I've had the pleasure of co-investing with Ben's funds before, so I'm really glad to see him on the panel as well. So I'm just going to kick this off by saying what we do and don't focus on. So I'm going to talk a bit about what my fund, BioRock Ventures, looks for as we invest in therapeutic startups. We, think that this is a space that probably is underinvested, especially at that very first angel seed stage. We are not giving anybody investment advice. We are not allowed to do that, but we are very happy to share our thinking. And we do regularly co-invest with angels, other VC funds, and the like. So I'm going to go ahead and talk through a couple of slides about what we look at. And then I think there's going to be a bit of time, Hall, at the end for Q&A. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So let's see. So just a little bit about me. I've been doing therapeutics for a couple of decades. I, as I mentioned, am managing director of BioRock Ventures. We invest seed and Series A stage into startups developing therapeutics. I have a PhD and an MBA, and then 20 years of operating experience in startups, which I founded, and then medium-sized and large public companies before becoming an investor, first as an angel, and then BioRock Ventures Fund 1. We're now raising and investing from Fund 2. So we've had some IPOs in the past, as well as other exits. And, for those interested in track records, that is on here as well. So let's talk about what we look at when we are investing. I'm going to start just with a reminder of what we are investing in. We start at the seed stage, seed size amounts, into companies developing FDA-regulated therapeutic drugs. So that is not devices, it is not diagnostics, it is not health IT, it's just therapeutics. So my comments are just relevant to those kinds of companies. And they are, sometimes related to the other regulated product industries, but are really directed at biopharma. Some common surprising things about this space are on this somewhat data-dense slide. I would just like to start with reminding people about the basics of this space. These data sort of sets are all from the former Silicon Valley Bank annual healthcare exits report. So if anybody wants more in-depth dive or to see these numbers in a bigger font, you have Jonathan Norris and his team to thank. And it is available on the web that every year and half year they put these out. So one of the things about biopharma is it is actually the largest venture capital segment in healthcare. It's bigger than health IT, it's bigger than devices and diagnostics and tools, and sometimes bigger than all three combined. So it's quite large. So there's a lot of different ways that groups have successfully invested in this space, both for impact as well as for returns. So just want to acknowledge that our lens is just one of the many successful lenses here. The other thing to keep in mind is that the exits and returns in this space are almost always via an acquisition of a larger biopharma. So in a very real sense, when you are investing as an angel or a venture capital fund or otherwise into this space, you're investing in a B2B company at the end of the day. They are going to need to be bought by somebody larger. One of the most common misconceptions is about the length of time it takes if you are doing private investment in this space. So I like to show one of the many graphs that the team at SVB came up with. Here you see one that on the far right of the slide in the middle says private biopharma M&As on average are 3 to 5 years. That's from the first investment to the actual acquisition. So I think a lot of people think it takes quote unquote forever to get your money back, so to speak. In actual fact, this is average data. So it does not take, I would argue, forever. It's about the same as other investment categories. And we can talk about that in the Q&A too. And the second thing is that, what is going on here? Most of these acquisitions are early stage. So they're going to be before the product reaches the market, before any revenues have occurred. These companies are getting bought by these larger biopharma companies who continue the product development from there. So if you're investing in private therapeutic startups, you are looking at a time period where you're helping to fund product development until a larger organization can take over. You are not funding all the way, the 20 years and multi-billions of dollars it takes on average to get a single product to the market. You're not funding that whole thing. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. So I'm going to just go to some next slides about specifically what we look at. Hall, I'm going to try and go through all of the slides, but I know there may be questions that come up. So if whoever is moderating on the question side feels that we should stop and address a question, I'm happy to do that along the way as well.
We'll do so.
Thanks. Okay, so perhaps some surprising thoughts on this slide. Moving to the next one. Okay, so what do we look for? And again, we cannot give you investment advice. This is just our lens. There are other good ways to do it as well. We prefer to look for startups that have products, an idea of a product or a product in development, but a product over the sort of breakthrough platform science kind of company for a number of reasons, one of which is that there are a lot of fantastic venture funds out there, venture capital funds, that already do an amazing job of supporting the breakthrough scientists coming out of academia. We are venture capital, So we are looking for returns. So we are also looking for products for that reason. There are many fantastic reasons to invest at the earlier or sort of more high science risk stage. It's incredibly important. I was a scientist myself. Some of those are going to lean more philanthropic or impact oriented. So those are other ways of doing it. We focus on the product. So we are minimizing science risk in our choices by choosing companies that are working on, for example, known targets in the body, or sort of known modalities, small molecules, biologics. We'll look at gene therapy or gene editing or mRNA or all kinds of stuff, but usually not looking for that first, the first time somebody's done something like that. Instead, what we're doing is focusing our due diligence and our sort of assessment and discussion around what are they doing with their product with the money that they're raising that we would put in alongside others. So what are the regulatory risks? What are the manufacturing risks? What are the clinical trial risks that are in front of them? And then, beyond that, you'll see these other two, market and execution risk, really common to a lot of startups, right? So in the space of biopharma, what would be unique is usually the business model is almost exactly the same, right? So there's not a lot of iteration there. You're not getting revenue data like you will in a tech startup or, monthly users or anything like that. What you're really looking at is the product, right? And do they have a sort of target product profile that would put them in a competitive spot for an unmet need disease area? And did they protect that market? And we'll talk a little bit about composition matter intellectual property, which is a core way that you would protect the product that you're developing. And, will insurance reimburse it? Because even if it's super useful to patients and doctors want patients to take it, if insurance will not reimburse it, it can be very hard for these products to make money. So those are specific to biopharma. So again, we look for a clear path to an exit, because I mentioned that most of these companies are getting returns to venture capital by being acquired, whether they're still private or after they're public. We want a clear product profile, and we want to be giving them money to get to a product development milestone. So clear milestones, clear product profile, clear path to exit, because these can be somewhat expensive products, right? We look for efficient use of the capital that we're giving them, and we look for an experienced operator team. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about those criteria in just a second. So we're going to go to another slide. This is, I think, another way of saying what I just said before, just to make it a little more clear. So you want to be asking your founders, how is the product that you're working on going to treat patients better than what is available to them now and in development that you know about? I think a lot of startups kind of lose track of that. You are at the end of the day a business, right? So make sure they can answer that question. They will then need to show that it actually does do that job better, does treat those patients better than what's available now and what's available in development, primarily through safety and efficacy data before they get into people. And then once they're in the clinic, do the founders understand what are the clinical endpoints that they're going to need to use to show that this product is better than what else is out there for patients? And what evidence have they already generated or that are they aware of from others? And then, we talked a bit about the ownership of the product, right? So that is primarily through patents. And I know there's some back and forth in tech versus biopharma about patents. They're very important in biopharma and are the bread and butter of how you protect your innovation. Generally, the patents are not granted when these people are working on innovating, but they have been filed. So you're going to want to see that they have filed something that is novel, right? That they're going to get in novel. They're going to own the molecule that they're actually testing. If there's a moment at the end, I'll talk about some variations on this, but basically if they don't have a path to composition or matter IP, again, it does not have to be granted, but it is very hard to get acquired by a larger company. that doesn't mean that what they're doing isn't important to patients. It's just harder for them to make money as a business. And then we really look for experienced operators in the teams that we invest in, meaning people who have experience at the stage that the product is in at the time that we're funding it. So we don't, for example, want, the CEO of, big pharma to come in and run a startup that's at the preclinical stage. If that person has no experience, just because they're famous or it's not going to be, you've got to know what actually needs to get done, because these are FDA regulated products. You have to do it right. We see, I don't know, computer programmers or salesmen, these folks don't necessarily have the relevant operating experience to get the product moved from point A to B. So you really need to see that on the team. That doesn't mean those capabilities can't be around the table, but you have to have the relevant experience. So that's also something that we recommend and that we do insist on having in our investments. We like to see that there are also going to be experienced venture capital firms who regularly invest in biopharma, who are around the table already or interested in getting around the table if they get to the next step. So we do have those conversations, and or biopharma partners. So some of these medium or large biopharma folks may already be doing research collaborations with the founders. That's very helpful as well. It's all about having that experience around the table. And lastly, we're sure we look at sort of how much time is it going to take to get from point A to B? Are they raising the right amount of money to do that? Can they raise that right amount of money? Can be hard in this space. So we want to see that they have clear visibility to the next sort of value inflection point with the money that we're giving them. And one last slide. So here, I'm going to talk briefly, and then if you have Q&A, I can give you more anecdotes in sum about what we're looking at. So team and market and competitive position. You see that in every investment that any angel investor is doing. But in our space of biopharma and therapeutics, we need to see relevant experience in drug development in an operating company. Could be a startup, could be a big co. We need to see that the product that they have in mind or beginning to develop has a shot at addressing an unmet need, just like any other product and any other startup. But that in our space is going to look like, what is the target product profile? What are the clinical endpoints that they're going to go after once they reach the clinic? What is, in the end of the day, the label that they would get on the drug and are therefore allowed to market to patients? So they need to be thinking about that even at the earliest stages. We need to see that they have patent protection around their products. So, we can talk again about, I'm not sure how much more time I have, but I will defer to Q&A, sort of the details of that. But we want to see a meaningful improvement in the standard of care, at least is what they're trying to achieve. When we are funding them, we want to know that they are going to get to point B with the money that they're raising, and that they have the necessary skill set through advisors and the core team to get there. Of course, science or otherwise it may not work out. That's the risk that we are taking, but we want to know that they're doing it correctly so that they can show that their product is safe and efficacious. If they do that, then they have a strong possibility of being acquired by a larger biopharma and therefore returning our money and making us money if we're a venture capital investor. And certainly, most importantly, having an impact on the patients who have this unmet need. And finally, in this space, it's really important that somebody follows us, because and I think those of us also in the meeting who are angel investors, are not the last investor. We need to make sure that there is interest from bigger, deeper pockets down the line, whether it's a big co or a bigger venture capital fund or crossover fund or public markets that will continue to fund the product development so that they can keep going. Okay, so that is sort of the key sort of principles that I wanted to share with you. And I'm really excited to hear questions. I'm very happy to talk to anybody after this who might want to co-invest with us, pitch us, etc. We're very happy to talk to anybody in the space.
Great. Thanks, Mary. Great presentation. My first question is, I've heard many investors, when they ask about the customer of the therapeutic company, they're referring to the pharma that's going to buy them, not the user that's going to use the therapeutic. How much do you think the startup should know about that pharma company that will buy them at the early stage? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I will say most founders are not saying we're building to be bought, but I do think you need to understand as a founder and also as a, say, angel investor, that, you know, there are certain criteria that all of us in the industry, and I mentioned I was in the industry for several decades, use to assess whether a product will be successful from a business standpoint, and it boils down to, will you have an impact on patients? So you need to understand how these companies evaluate these products. Effectively, it's an NPV model. Like they look at, and it's a very specific target product profile. What does your product? You are not treating all of cancer, for example. You will have, you know, third line and, you know, a particular subgroup of cancer patients who've tried, you know, 2 other treatments first. So there are very specific ways that they will look at it and compare it to other products. So to do that, you would probably need to have somebody reach out, probably to business development folks, sometimes to R&D folks, but usually it's the business development folks who are ready to talk, to understand what they're looking for. Are they even interested in treatments in this therapeutic area? You know, and there's also lots of medium-sized biopharmas who will acquire you, especially if you're very small. So don't rule them out.
Great. My second question is around intellectual property. When I look at the slides in a biotherapeutic startup, it's multiple patents in different sections, and it's a layered approach, I've heard it said. What do you look for in a patent strategy in most therapeutics that you think that's a good one versus a not so good one?
Yeah, so we invest at the very earliest stages. So there's usually not a layered strategy at that stage. But what we often will see, I didn't mention the sort of flip or sort of negative of what we don't like to see, but I'll say it here. So we see a huge number of groups that have something that they don't own. Either they haven't properly licensed it from the actual innovator, or they are sort of reusing something that has no protection. Those can be useful, but they aren't good for protecting a business. So I think the core of it is, what is the product that you are actually putting into your, and often these folks are before the clinic, so into your preclinical work, is it the same exact compound as what is listed chemically, let's say if it's a small molecule, in your patents? You know, sometimes people will have use patents, meaning they have, you know, compound ABC that is used for, you know, use, you know, dermatology or something, but that's not composition of matter. Composition of matter is, here is the molecule right here. They have a picture in the patent. And, you know, a patent lawyer can tell you if you have composition of matter, if you're not clear on that. So a lot of founders don't understand that sort of core piece of our business. You know, reformulations, et cetera, different pathways, 505(b)(2)s, there's all kinds of like layers like that add deterrence. But at the end of the day, if you don't own the product and you just want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars working on it, well, you're just working on somebody else's product.
Great, thanks. My next question is, I've seen a lot of investors look at these deals through the lens of the physician. If it makes the physician successful and it doesn't change their process and it's going to be easy to train them on it, then this is going to be successful. If it's not, it's not. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, the doctor is a core part of the end user sort of dyad, if you will, as a patient and doctor. You know, I think that mainly comes into play. You mentioned in particular, and I underline it, do we have to change the way healthcare is done? We all, I think, have ideas for how we could do all of our healthcare better. But it's very hard to change people's behavior. So if there's not already somebody set up whose specialty or job it is to treat XYZ, aging is a common one that's not officially a disease, right? So people developing a treatment for aging, it's like, what are you selling, right? So you've got to be specific. Like, are you treating a cancer? Like, okay, what kind, right? And then is that dark? How do they meet them? Do they meet them in the hospital? Do they meet them in an outpatient setting? You need to think about how your product will actually be prescribed by whom, right? Is it a neurologist? Is it psychiatry? Is it, you know, how they actually come to learn about the unmet needs of the patients. It's not at the very early stages. You're often looking at the broader market, and you can already see examples, and you should have done that work. It's free. I know entrepreneurs don't have a ton of free cash to do huge marketing studies. Just look at what's out there already. You don't have to call doctors, but know the buyer of your company will absolutely end up calling the prescribing doctors to understand how they perceive the data that you've generated. Are doctors excited about it or not?
Right. And the final question before we jump to our presentations today is, I've noticed that, especially in the angel world, that they look for the shortest possible exit. There are many exits you can have at clinical 1, 2, approval, and so forth. And unfortunately, many entrepreneurs want to play out all the scenarios in front of me all the time. And I really have a hard time keeping up with that. But I've noticed that the ones that have the shortest time to exit are the ones that get the most interest. How do you look at the time to exit on these deals?
Yeah, it's tough being the first money in, and I think that's why there's fewer funds like BioRock. And I think it is really important to pay close attention to, and it was sort of, I'm going to flip up to one of our slides here. That was the end here is like the time and the dollars to exit are reasonable and achievable, right? I think that's something you need to ask yourself, especially if you're going to invest in a company that has science risk. Because I will say we try to not do that, because you can go in circles, right? So if they are doing a brand new piece of science, do you really have the 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to invest? If not, maybe leave it to, there's some very amazing, really deep-pocketed, been around for decades, venture firms that I know and respect. Maybe they should be doing that, or join them, but or understand that it's philanthropy, right? So the first thing I say is, do they have a product, right? Have they reduced their science risk sufficiently that this is no longer a science experiment? And the second thing is, you got to look at when did these things get acquired? So there's slides that will break out in these reports saying, okay, well, in Alzheimer's disease, it's going to take a very long time before you can prove that your product is safe and efficacious. Maybe not till phase 3, right? So toward the end of the product development. But some, like oncology, ophthalmology, there's a couple of therapies areas where you can get acquired fairly early, even before you have gone to the clinic, right? So that's another way to be what we look for in sort of our investments, and angel investors can look for is sort of time to, acquisition for products like the product that's being developed, and pick the shorter half of those.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mary. It's a great presentation. Appreciate you sharing that with us today. And with that, let's go ahead and bring up our first presenter that's going to pitch. We have with us NeuroVRD. If you guys can come up on here. Thanks, Shields, for joining us. Thanks, Jeff, for being here as well. And with that, go ahead, guys, and load up your slides and kick off. We have Mary and Ben here to review your deal.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hall, and thank you everyone for attending today. Hi, my name is Jeffrey Owen, and I'm the CEO and founder of Neurovascular Research and Design, or NeuroVRD as we call it. I started NeuroVRD in 2019 after receiving requests from the urological surgeons at Hopkins with whom I had previously worked. They wanted me to develop a method that would monitor nerves during radical prostatectomy with the goal of reducing postoperative morbidity. Stryker asked me to develop a device for identifying the location of nerves and nerve roots during MIS spine surgery that was superior to the device that I had originally developed for a competitor called NuVasive. Stryker's goal was to maintain surgeon loyalty to the Stryker spine system. Hopkins and Stryker contacted me because of my longtime involvement with intraoperative monitoring, or IOM. Prior to starting NeuroVRD, I set up and ran the IOM programs at WashU in St. Louis, and then at Johns Hopkins. Following my nearly 20-year academic career, I started and ran Sentient Medical Systems for 11 years. We provided IOM at more than 600 hospitals, and in 2007, when I sold it for $28 million, our annual revenues were $45 million. Next slide, please. As physicians and surgeons, you know that an unintended surgical insult can occur during surgery that can result in a degradation in the patient's preoperative neurological status. This means that these patients are going to wake up with a deficit. If the incidence or severity of the deficit is high enough, the surgery is considered high risk. And some of the adverse outcomes that you can see on this slide include impotence and incontinence, or even more importantly, strokes and even paralysis. Next slide, please. To avoid these deficits, the neurological structures that are at risk during the surgery are monitored in real time. This type of intraoperative monitoring has been available for more than 40 years. Traditionally, a technologist administers the test and a physician reads the data and interacts with the surgeon. While intraoperative monitoring is legally and medically the standard of care, it is available in less than 17% of the 2.5 million high-risk surgeries performed annually in the United States. Those that are monitored are typically in urban areas, high-income zip codes, or high-volume hospitals. This lack of availability is due to a limited number of monitoring personnel, which results in the very high cost. So the average cost now to monitor a surgery is $23,000. And in some instances, we were getting more money for the monitoring than the surgeon was for performing the surgery. Next slide, please. Our solution to this problem was to develop Sentinel, which is an AI-driven intraoperative monitoring platform that automatically and continuously performs IOM. As compared to the traditional team approach, which you can see in this left slide, the Sentinel platform is simple in its instrumentation, as seen on this right slide. Sentinel consists of appropriate sensors that elicit and record data, which are then transmitted via Bluetooth to a processing station, which is one of those little pictures of the computer down below. And that processing station then analyzes and evaluates the data and will warn the surgeon if the nerve is irritated, but more importantly, it will warn the surgeon before the nerve is injured, which means that intervention can be initiated. And intervention is the key factor here. If the surgeon still wants a reading physician to be involved, then they can request the use of our remote reading station. Next slide, please. Sentinel is portable and uses AI continuously to collect and analyze data during surgery. It meets CMS guidelines for billing. All the procedures we are administering are non-investigational. They're traditional procedures. And we are in the process of getting FDA approval on the patented hardware and software that we have developed. Sentinel is initially intended to provide IOM in the 83% of the high-risk surgeries that are not currently monitored. So we're going after the market that is not monitored, which consists of 83% of the 2.5 million high-risk surgeries that are performed annually. Next slide, please. As you can see in this comparison slide, Sentinel's automation eliminates the need for monitoring personnel. It's available any time of day or week, and it's because it uses ML. The reliability and the sensitivity of testing will continue to improve with use. Finally, Sentinel reduces the cost by more than 61%, which will then reduce the surgeon's insurance profile. It increases its availability. It has improved sensitivity and reliability. And these are all advantageous, not only to the surgeon, but also to the hospital. Next slide. The obvious long-term market for Sentinel is the $16.6 billion SAM market for those surgeries that are currently not being monitored. Our initial SOM market is the 8.9 billion of the 1.2 million surgeries for spinal degeneration and 100,000 radical prostatectomies. So we're going to go after those 1.2 million spinal degenerations and 100,000 radical prostatectomy surgeries initially. Next slide, please. Our plan is to use a capital light strategy where we will finish developing and market our turnkey IP to a large medical device companies. These device companies see our platform as a revenue stream, but also as a means to maintain surgeon and hospital loyalty to their product line. They're all worried about losing market share. Software Danik, for example, is coming out with a new hardware system. And I know Stryker and J&J are concerned about market share once that comes out. We have started the FDA and CMS review process. We've identified and recruited KOLs, and we'll be starting our clinical studies for spine and prostate surgery at Johns Hopkins and Columbia University in Q4 of this year. Next slide, please. We have followed our initial conversation with Stryker and have started discussions with Medtronic, Neon Coden, and Intuitive. Our involvement with Intuitive was actually initiated by them, and their goal was to interface our system with their Da Vinci platform. If this is successful, and we'll be testing out our platform with their Da Vinci system in early November, this will further increase the market size to which we can apply our platform to their robotic surgeries. Next slide. I'm very proud of the business and our advisory team. Nick Chung, our COO, and Shields Day, our CFO, are well-versed and experienced in the respective fields, and you'll have an opportunity to meet them during the Q&A process. And if you look at our scientific advisory team, we have some of the most amazing, well-known surgeons in the country advising us and part of our KOL team. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the milestones we've achieved, which is in the first vertical red line, and which are planned. For example, we've hired the law firm of Latham and Watkins to help us with our FDA process. Our patents have been filed and provisional patents have been approved, and we're working with Mintz out of Boston who will help us finish the patenting process. Next slide, please. Our progress towards an MVP has been steady. We have achieved proof of concept and moved on in all categories to identify and meet MVP requirements. As shown in the previous slide, we plan to have all of our major work done by Q3 2024, with an exit later in the year or maybe early 2025. Next slide, please. So this is the slide that my CFO wrote up, okay? So let's talk about why we're here. We're looking to raise $2 million in a seed round via convertible note. This will be the first outside capital coming into the company. Up until now, myself and Mr. Chung have invested well over $750,000. We will be setting up a 20% option pool for the employees and KOLs. We anticipate the use of the proceeds to provide us with a 20-month runway, which would allow us plenty of time to exit by the end of 2024. The main use of the proceeds will be to complete our remaining product development, finish clinical trials, and finish the patenting and FDA process. So in summary, we believe that the Sentinel platform will revolutionize IOM because it will first increase its availability for surgeries, regardless of location, income of the patient, or hospital volume. It is more sensitive and reliable than traditional IOM and will only get smarter, if you want to use that term, with use, and is significantly less expensive than a traditional IOM, which is good for both the surgeon, hospital, and patient. I really appreciate you inviting us to present today, and I appreciate your time for listening to me, and we look forward to your questions coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Ben, can you kick us off with your first question?
Yeah, and thank you, Jeff, for the great presentation. I actually have multiple questions, but I just want to clarify first. Your plan is to exit prior to any commercialization, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't say anything.
Okay. Do you have indications from, or have you talked to potential acquirers about the very specific milestones they want to see before an acquisition?
Well, initially when we were working, I was working with Stryker pretty heavily, and all they really wanted to see was proof of concept. And then we sort of zoomed right past that point because it got so interesting. So no, other than that.
And have you gone back to Stryker?
Well, not yet. We're working heavily with Intuitive, and we're going to be going back with Stryker. We wanted to have a couple more things in line. We wanted to have the clinical studies up and going, you know, but so we haven't gone back to them just yet.
Okay. And then with regard to your FDA approval, because this is both a hardware and a software company and product, right?
Yeah.
Is the FDA approval for the product itself? Is it for the two specific indications you mentioned, or is it for something broader?
Nick, do you want to answer that? I can.
Sure, I can take
the,
yeah. I'll just
yeah,
take
go
a
for it.
first stab at it. Hi, Ben. Thanks for the question. I'm Nick. So our current plan right now is to go after the 510K for our primary product, which is the AI software, and then pursue in parallel a de novo pathway for the novel blood oxygenation sensor.
Okay. The applications initially are going to be spinal degeneration and the prostate surgery. Those are a large volume, sort of low hanging. I hate to use that term, low hanging. However, we have two capstone projects going on now that will add further features to the device so that we can then expand it into some other surgical specialties. One of the things we want to get into is more into the cardiothoracic, cardiovascular arena. So it will extend beyond these two types.
So I guess this comes back to my original question about milestones and discussions with acquirers, because it sounds like you've got at least two separate FDA submissions you're going to have to do that are going to be different timelines, because the de novo is obviously different than a 510K. And if your de novo is only for the blood oxygenation, is that going to really cover all the different surgeries you're talking about? Or are you also going to have to do multiple trials for each specific indication, each specific surgery that you want to address?
Yeah, the blood flow one, the near infrared spectroscopy, is designed initially to be just for the prostates. So there we're looking at 100,000 surgery. But we don't need that for like the spinal degeneration or AAAs. So we'll have a pretty big market still without the use of the NIRS device. Okay.
Great. And we have one question from the audience there. When you mentioned the use of AI, is the fundraise contributing to the development of AI?
Go ahead, Nick. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, the fundraise will definitely be going into the development of the AI. As everyone knows, takes a lot of training data and testing data to really build and optimize an AI. So a lot of the, if you go back to the fundraise slide, a large chunk of that of these funds will be actually funding our clinical tests that will provide that data for us.
What portion would go after AI?
It's difficult to say exactly what portion, because all of the clinical tests will produce data that will be directly beneficial to the AI optimization.
Yes. So
basically, you could say that every single. Yeah, Jeff, what were you going to say?
No, I was just saying, like on this pie chart, you've got 20% or so going into product development. I don't think we've ever broken it down into AI development, within that pie, that slice.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what are the deal terms for the raise, and what is the future funding that will be needed after this round?
Shields, you're on.
Yeah, so can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Yeah, so the deal terms are, it's a 2-year convertible note with a cap of 8 million, or valuation cap of 8 million, and we do not anticipate needing any additional funds after this raise. This should gives us an 18+ month runway, and we expect to be fully in the process of exiting and done with that by the time we run out of cash.
Great, thanks. That concludes our questions, and we are at the end of our time. I want to thank you guys for a great presentation, and with that, we'll move to the next one. At that point, I'd love to have Sante Bio come up to the stage, and we'll carry forward from there. Great, thanks for joining us, James here. Go ahead and you have your slides up. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and kick off.
Great. Can you hear me and see the slides?
Yes, we see the slides, and we hear you fine.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the time. I'm Dr. Michael Francis, CEO and founder at Sante Bio. We are a joint preservation company, and I'm here to talk to you with James, our CCO, about our reinforcer technology, which is an arthroscopic suture augment for improving rotator cuff repair in sports medicine. Our company's vetted and funded and supported by NIH, the Air Force, and the National Science Foundation. So a bit of background about me, why I am here. So I am an experienced CXO, founder, and inventor. I have deep commercial R&D. I've got 86 patents to my name, and most of these, all but a very small few, are monetized in currently clinically used medical device products. Most recently, I co-founded and invented all the technologies for my company Embody, which is hot off an exit earlier this year in March in a $275 million acquisition by Zimmer Biomet. So the problem, 45% of rotator cuff surgeries fail, which is astronomical when you look at about 500,000 performed each year in the US alone. That leads to over a $10 billion healthcare burden. So why so many failures? What is happening here? So the suture that is used arthroscopically to hold everything together is incredibly strong. It's used in parachutes. It's used to help tug boats into harbor. The trouble is the tendon tissue is not very strong at all. It's made of aligned fibers, much like in a broom. You put your finger into a broom and pull through, nothing catches. Same happens with suture in our tendons. And as you can see here in the images, essentially the suture itself being braided together acts like a saw. It has a tooth. And the surgeons like to say it cheese wires. It pulls right through and cuts through the tendon, usually in the first 3 months after surgery, which is a big issue for athletes, for warfighters, and for us mere mortals. So what I've developed over the last couple of years is an elegant solution based off of real world objects, such as a grommet or what you find in a boat sail or your shoes, where every fibrous object is reinforced with a grommet. So we're calling it the knotless suture reinforcer. And you can see here what happens during a normal arthroscopic shoulder repair where suture goes in and it will tear usually within a few months. So what we've developed is this augment here, this grommet, this reinforcer to share the load, delivered very easily within the existing surgical workflows. And don't let the teeth scare you. You can see on the quarter, it's a very small thing that's been enabled with a new type of technology called micro injection molding that didn't exist until recently. So we've designed this with my engineer, who is a PhD trained in machine learning, AI, and finite element analysis. We optimize the design to radically reduce the forces in the shoulder. You can see on the left panel here, with a little bit of strain, that's stretch motion of the joint, we see a lot of force going up, the megapascals of force. A typical shoulder will tear under about 6 to 8 megapascals of force. So you see here tears and tears and tears occurring. With our augment in place, there's hardly any stress, any force applied in this shoulder in cyclic loading on and off axis. It's reduced by about 1/10 of what it would be with just suture alone. And we've not just done it in silico, we've done it in real life. We've done cadaver labs working at ANA, the premier lab in the country with top surgeons. And we've also tested everything on the bench. So we've shown at least a 300% increase in the holding power of this augment in bench biomechanical testing for our very advanced prototypes. So we have a material that's been through basic bench testing, cadaver testing, and we have a very compelling value proposition here for efficacy, efficiency, and performance. So what does the space look like? There's been a lot of activity in sports medicine in the rotator cuff area specifically. So there's been a $200 million acquisition for Rotation Medical, ConMed at $250 million, and my prior company, Embody, was acquired at $275 million. They make patch products, which are designed to heal and make new tendon grow in about 9 to 18 months. Some surgeons love these, about 10%. 10% cannot get enough of this product. I've been wondering what's holding back the other 90%. They are more sensitive to that early healing phase, not the late healing, which can be very important for some indications, but most surgeons have been looking for a solution. We've done a very large survey through our I-Corps program and continued outreach with our docs from our KOLs. And we found that almost 80% of surgeons are looking for a better solution. They recognize there's a problem. They recognize that most injuries at the cuff fail because of the suture tendon pull through, and they're looking for something that goes beyond the patch, something that helps early. So getting there, the first thing, of course, is to build a fantastic veteran, experienced leadership team. So I myself have a background, again, in devices and therapeutics. I have many products I've brought to market. I've raised over $31 million in investor funding and about $26 million now in grants. I've gotten a lot of money from DARPA, the Air Force, the Army, in previous ventures and into the current venture now. Working with Dr. John Dickens as our CSO. He was a former director of orthopedics at Walter Reed, now a professor at Duke. He's been crucial in helping test, design, refine everything, and introduce us to a great surgeon and commercial network. James Watkins, who's here with us now, is a former Microsoft exec. He's a go-to-market specialist, deal maker, done quite a lot of licensing deals and over $1 billion in revenue opportunities generated. And we have a fantastic regulatory team driven by MICRA, Dave McEarl, who has gotten 100 other products through the FDA in the device pathway. Our product is the device, to be clear on that, 510K. So how have we de-risked this and how have we progressed? So we have a heavily de-risked pathway. We have a clear regulatory path, 25-page document, and all the testing beginning and underway to get to the 510K. We have manufacturing prototypes made and tested at scale with MTD Micromolding, our established manufacturing partner. We have a full year of testing, bench in silico and cadaver. And we have, again, manufacturing scale partners established and working on distribution channels also. We have US PC and PCT patents pending on composition of matter and the methods. And we have a freedom to operate opinion on the technology as well. And our equity is leveraging the NIH, NSF, and my own personal funds into the venture. So with our timeline for preclinical testing through FDA submission, we are 15 to 18 months to 510K clearance post funding. So the market opportunity, looking at rotator cuff and where we extend out into Achilles, muscle tears, and hernia, other places where the suture commonly rips through. We have a very large total available market. We're looking at about 1.8 billion US, 4 billion OUS. And what we're looking at for our SOM is about 120 million. That's on a 95% margin. And that's 2030 projected revenue there. So what we've modeled out is a very profitable, scalable business. You see revenue growing rampantly after we launch with fairly conservative market shares, I would say, which we are forecasting to handle on our own. So we're not looking at a secondary raise. We're looking for just one raise to get us to sustainability and potentially an exit within 2 years. So we've been validated through surgeons. We've been validated through the National Science Foundation and NIH. We have leverage channels we're working through. We don't owe royalties. The technology is ours. We invented it in-house, no university involvement. We're looking at strong positive cash flow. And in the future, we're looking at, again, operating a business with very strong dividends or an exit to a potential strategic who we're in conversations with now. So we have reinforcers, differentiation and superiority versus the competition. The competitors are also potential M&A partners, of course, here listed below. And just a short summary of how we differentiate strongly. We have very highly improved force distribution relative to any competing tech, be it the surgeon arthroscopically tying a bunch of knots to share the load, which is what they will do, or via a bioinductive scaffold, such as I showed previously. So this technology we've shown to deploy quickly, under 60 seconds. The competing tech takes a very long time. Our technology helps immediately with poor tissue quality. Other technologies do not. There's a lot of poor tissue out there, smokers, diabetics, old age, many chronic conditions in the shoulder that are not addressed by anything. So we have also easy placement without training, no specialized tooling or other challenges that are common with the competitors, low surface profile, and very importantly here, this technology you're looking to price at about $1,000. It makes it very competitive for ambulatory surgical centers and hospitals. Almost half of cases for the shoulder repair are moving to ASCs who are very price sensitive. The current patch products cost around $5,000. The total case may run $9,000, $10,000. So they can't add on a $5,000 product. So we're giving them something better that works and is more affordable and very large margins, over 90% margins for us. So how are we going to get there? How have we gotten there so far? We've been looking at non-dilutives so far successfully. We've raised between the NIH, NSF, DOD, and my personal capital about $1 million. And we have scored grants from the NIH, which we're looking at bringing in $1.9 million, possibly end of this year, another $1 million from the National Science Foundation. We have a total pipeline of about $8 million over the next 12 to 18 months, which could come in. So I myself have won 25 million in the past 8 years. I'm not going to win them all, but I think we will get more than our fair share historically. And what we're looking to do now is raise $4 million to take us through the development process and go to market, become fully commercial. So we're looking at $4 million on our price preferred round. It's $20 million pre with the usual terms. And again, this will get us through the 510K. It'll cover go-to-market activities, product expansion, and we'll have US product launch through revenue. And again, we're ready to commercialize within about 18 months. The research is complete. This is not a science project, it's a development program. The product has been validated with multiple surgeons. We have the FTO from the legal team. The patent work is done and filed, and the regulatory path is very clear for this device with very well-defined predicates. And we have our inventory build on the horizon. To sum up the opportunity for the investment, we have 2 years of development completed and very strong differentiation for this tech, addressing a very large unmet medical need. We have a very experienced team with deep industry and clinical expertise, again, for an IP-rich orthobiologic technologies that we've developed in-house. We're adding values for the surgeon via simplicity and effective tissue repair. And it really, again, addresses a very big need. Most surgeons will not use the current patches. A small number of high volume users will use a patch. Most have looked for something else. We're providing that something else. So our initial product targets an $867 million US annual serviceable market opportunity, which is on our niche of soft tissue sports medicine. And what we're looking to do is, again, raise $4 million to commercialize the product. It's going to cover our FDA submission, our market launch, and we've been looking, James and I, we've been sorting through 3 of the largest orthopedic surgical groups in the country, which have over 300 doctors, which we're targeting in our launch. So here's our projected financials. I'm not going to walk through all this. It's quite a lot of numbers. Happy to go through it later if there's interest, but you can see here we are very strongly cash flow positive after we go to market, and our margins are very healthy. So with that, I'll close and happy to take any questions, and would say it's time to prevent needless, costly, and very painful soft tissue re-tears and give the sports med docs the elegant and effective tech they want and need. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Michael, for a great presentation. Ben, what's your first question?
I will ask basically the same question I did last time, but only because you brought up your experience with exits and strategics. At what stage and what milestones are you expecting to achieve to be attractive for an acquisition?
Yes, great question. So the reality is, in our space and in this climate, more so than ever, we need to get to market. We need to get through our 510K clearance, and we probably need a year of revenue under our belt and at least a dozen surgeons, our KOLs, who are going to incentivize to get the product in many patients, as many as they're comfortable with, and generate the feedback that the potential M&A partners are going to want to hear. The surgeons are going to need to talk to the potential acquisition partners to show their comfort and ease and happiness with the technology. So we're expecting realistically, again, we're 18 to 24 months or so from a possible exit realistically.
So the $4 million that you're raising today gets you through FDA. Are you expecting this is the only cash you're going to need, or are you going to do another capital raise sometime pre-FDA late next year to ensure you've got runway?
Yeah, so we've got enough. Getting through the FDA for a micro injection molded technology is relatively thrifty. A lot of that $4 million actually covers the go-to-market strategy, the sales team, 5 regional reps, a year of care and feeding of all of those persons on the commercialization team. Only about $1 million is actually what's needed to finish the development work. So that gets us, that $4 million gets us per our model through what we need to be a sustainable business. So we're not looking at a second raise. Although if we need a second raise, obviously we'll have to reevaluate.
Okay.
Then if I could just jump in for a second, what we are seeing in this space is that there are very nice exits with relatively little revenue. So we believe that we just need to prove the efficacy of the product and then prove the adoption in the market. And that's what we'll be focusing on.
And then last quick question for me. Is the FDA submission for the indication of rotator cuff surgery specifically, or is it for any joint tendon repair?
Well, our predicate covers a large number of joints, so it's not narrowed down to only the rotator cuff, thankfully. So
Okay.
we will have a very broad IFU following their language. So we don't expect to do any studies beyond what the predicate has done. So we don't expect broader language, but again, the language is very, very broad and enabling. Covers almost all of our interest except for hernia, and hernia would have to be its own set of studies, but it does cover all the musculoskeletal system except for hernia.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Great. And I want to thank our investors, Ben and Mary, for their great, Mary for her presentation. Ben, thank you for the great questions. We're finished with the main portion of our session today. I want to thank everybody for a great presentation and a great session so far.